The recording. So this is Module 7 for Marketing 690. So just a very brief review. For discussion 6, it was on brand, legal, and compliance implications. You needed to have details, use sources, and 2 engagement postings. And basically, if you did that, you were fine. And the grades actually went out earlier today for discussion question 6. The PR short paper I haven't graded yet. What I was looking for is that you covered the 3 basic content requirements: newsworthiness, reputation, tools, and techniques. Use detailed examples and explanations. And also you explained the PR impact of whatever article you selected. Okay, so for Module 7, the discussion board has 2 parts. Part 1 is you're going to hopefully be able to use your selected company and find an example of a, I just drew a blank, of a CSR project. SR is social responsibility, and I just completely drew a blank on what C is. Community social responsibility. Corporate, thank you. It's great when you draw a blank on something like that, isn't it? You're going to discuss the consistency of what they have done with their brand values and explain their communication strategy. So there's so many different CSR projects out there. Some organizations do things for special months. February is Heart Month. October is Breast Cancer Month. Some organizations pick up a specific charity. Some organizations, I know I have a friend who works in a company that everybody gets the same day off every year to go work on a project somewhere. So how does it work out? What do they do? And how is it consistent with their brand values? So you're finding an example that they have done. If your company that you've selected doesn't have one, choose another company because lots of companies have them. Discussion 7.2. The syllabus talks about picking an example of a disaster, and it uses Hurricane Katrina, which is what, almost 19 years ago now, 2005, and it uses, some old examples. I'm saying that if you want to update the disasters, we've got some more recent hurricanes that were as devastating, if not more devastating, than Katrina. Hurricane Maria that killed Puerto Rico, Harvey that messed up Texas, Irma that hit the entire state of Florida. If you lived in Florida, there was nowhere to evacuate to. Florence that hit North Carolina this year, and Michael that totally devastated the panhandle of Florida this past year. There were floods in California, North Carolina, and Texas, fires and mudslides in California. So any kind of natural disaster, it doesn't have to be U.S., but I think that is easier to pick. And then you're going to discuss what companies have done. I don't know if any of you remember the Super Bowl ad from last year. It was one of my favorites. It was a Budweiser commercial, and it was a commercial where the guy gets up in the middle of the night, and he's the plant manager, and he leaves to go to the plant. And what he does is changes the plant from producing beer to producing water, and then they deliver it to disaster areas. Another one of my favorite charities that visits disaster areas is Tide. They bring in trucks filled with washing machines and dryers, and they call it Tide Loads of Hope, because oftentimes when people leave home in a disaster, they leave with nothing but the clothes on their back. And so what they do is people can come to these big trucks and do their laundry. So there are all kinds of wonderful things out there. Some of them we don't hear about, others we do. So many companies have been involved in it. So pick one of the disasters. As I said, it's perfectly okay to update it and discuss what companies have done. It doesn't have to be your selected company. If your selected company has done things, that's great. If not, pick another company that has done something. There are so many different companies to choose from. So for parts 1 and 2, use citations and references, incorporate all elements, use 2 peer replies, and one of your peer replies can be to me. They don't have to just be to each other. because I tend to ask a lot of questions. All right, so that's Module 7. You have no paper due in Module 7, no paper due in Module 8. The final paper is due in Module 9. It's worth 350 points, and I know this doesn't apply to the 2 people on the phone. However, there are several people in this class who submit papers late, and if you submit the final paper late, it's going to cost you 35 points. That's a huge hit. So I suggest that everybody start working on this final paper right now, especially since you don't have any papers due in Module 7 or Module 8. Terry said that. All right, so how do you get started on the final paper? The first thing I would do is review all of the feedback you've gotten for milestones 1, 2, and 3, because you're going to use a lot of information from 1, 2, and 3 in the final paper. What you want to do is eliminate redundancies. If you gave an overview of the company, you're only going to have to do that once. You don't have to do it twice. You're going to combine sections. You're going to implement any corrections that were put on your papers or improvement suggestions. You're going to move the messages, the illustrations to appendices. Check to see if your citations and references match. Confirm that all required sections are included, and there are additions. It's not just the sections from milestones 1, 2, and 3. Check your APA formatting and guidelines, and you're going to want to add the sections that needed to be added. As I was saying before I started the recording, I think I've taught this class either somewhere between 8 and 10 times, and every single time there is someone who does not remember to add the new sections. Okay, so how do you start it? The first thing you want are the background of the products, the market, the brand. So you're going to have an opening paragraph that talks a little bit about the company. The communication context and communication needs sections are not required, so I would put that into the background. You're then going to pick up on the 2 scenarios that we had. We had poor working conditions and you had discrimination in the workplace. You are going to combine the internal and external for both of them. So, under poor working conditions, your type and purpose. Was it to inform, educate, or persuade? You're going to talk about the target audience, and you're also going to talk about the method of communication. Almost everybody talked about the method for internal, but hardly anyone talked about the method for external. You're going to include your draft communication. I would put that in an appendix, and this is an ad from Discussion Board 4. The brand, legal, and compliance implications. You combine here the internal and the external, and you have one section for brand, legal, and compliance in poor working conditions. If you were lucky enough, and quite frankly, I hope, I know Kelly and Amy, what they did for whoever they reviewed for, those people are lucky because they can really use what you suggested for the brand, legal, and compliance. I hope you were also lucky and got some good feedback. Discrimination in the workplace. Internal and external are being combined again. Type and purpose. Make sure you include whether it's an offensive or defensive strategy. Remember, it can't be offensive if it's out in the news already. If people know about it, it becomes a defensive strategy. Again, the method of communication under target audience, and again, make sure that you've included the method for the external audience. Both draft communications, and I didn't say that in the poor working conditions. You're still having 2 communications, internal and external, and both of those are going in the appendices. Brand, legal, and compliance implications were just discussed in Discussion Board 6, and hopefully, again, you were lucky enough to get some good information that you can take from the posting that was on your messages. Here's where we have some ads. International differences. There's going to be some discussion in DB8 about international differences that you can pick up on. So you could wait till that's finished before you add this section, but you can get started on the sections where you've basically already done all of the work. You're going to have an HR issue communication for the United States and another country. You're going to write 2 messages, one for the United States, one for another country. You are not translating it into another language. You want to consider cultural differences in the 2 messages. And I don't want the message to just be, we have different holidays in different countries. That's really not cultural differences. Explain and justify why you have different messages. It could be because the culture is one where communication is indirect, where you sort of dance around an issue. It could be a culture where people are quite direct, and so you write things differently. The next add-on is external, and it's the advertising. This is under international differences. The internal is the HR message. The external is the different kinds of advertising that is done. Select ads from different countries and analyze the advertising differences. Another additional section to discuss target market and brand values. You want to look at the US, you want to look at a foreign market, and you want to share examples, and again, those would be in the appendix. Then you're going to summarize the entire paper, one summary for the entire paper. I'm going to stop there because that was a lot of information. Either of you have questions on this?
Nope.
No, not at the moment.
Okay. So now I've put the APA headings in. As I said, the sample paper that was posted on Monday morning in the announcements puts all the headings that you need for the paper are there. I've also added the appendices. All you have to do is delete all of the filler content that I put in there, add your content, and your paper is outlined and you can be sure you've included everything. So I'm starting out with XYZ Company. Remember, this is some background information. I would also put a little bit of information about the context and need, since those sections are not required. So poor working conditions, internal and external, is a main centered heading. Type and purpose, which is you're going to be talking about whether it's inform, persuade, or educate. The target audience, make sure you include method of communication, and you add the brand, legal, and compliance. Those are level 2 headings that are in the margin. Your next level 1 main heading is workplace discrimination. Again, it's internal and external. Type and purpose, this time you're going to be discussing offensive or defensive. Target audience, make sure for external you include the method of communication. And brand, legal, and compliance implications for internal and external messages. Then continuing with my headings. International differences, the internal and external. Remember, internal is the HR message, external is the advertising. Target markets and brand values, and I use target market and brand value as level 2 headings, but you could do the whole thing under one heading of target markets and brand values. You then have your 1 summary for the entire paper, your reference page, and then your appendices. This slide is the added information that you have not yet done. And so here are my suggested appendices. Appendix A, internal working conditions message. Appendix B, external working conditions message. Appendix C, internal discrimination message. Appendix D, external discrimination message. I put E and F as separately, but as you look at the sample paper that I posted, E and F were 1. I was able to put 2 messages on 1 appendices, and I was also able to put the U.S. ads and foreign ads on 1 page. So this is just making sure you're covering everything. If you can get 2 on 1 page, that's fine. All right, so some things to remember. Press release format. If you are using a press release, make sure you use the format. It was posted on January 6th in announcements. Review the sample paper, take out all the filler language, and your paper's outlined for you. That was posted in announcements today on 2/4. any message, the internal message, the external message, it is much better to come from an individual than to come from, it comes from a company. So I'm trying to think of a company nobody's using. Well, let's say, I think I used in my sample Southern New Hampshire University. So rather than saying, 2 employees from SNHU, 2 employees from the president, and you name the president, and it's okay if you make up a name. So be sure messages are not signed by the company or the HR department. Select one group for external messages. Do not say to all external stakeholders. First of all, half the people have no idea what a stakeholder means. So pick one group, because customers don't want to know necessarily the same thing as suppliers. The only time you might do all external stakeholders is a press release, which doesn't say who it's to anyway. It just says the contact information on it. Write different messages. This is for working conditions and for discrimination. The internal and external messages should not be the same. Don't tell me it's the same because they have the same issues. They don't. Messages should be different. Make sure you've reviewed all of your return papers. Do not lose points for things you've lost points for before. And as I've said several times, read it aloud before submitting, because that way you pick up on several things that you might miss reading silently. And if there are questions, post them. Okay, so I am going to X out of this. That's not what I want. Oops. All right, questions?
I have a question about the discussion. It's 2 different sections. Do you want them separately, like 2 different discussion threads?
They are, they're organized into 2 separate questions, 7.1 and 7.2.
So do them in separate discussion posts?
Yes.
Okay.
You want to make sure you respond to 7.1 and 7.2. This week it was combined, but it is separated. The one on CSR and the one on disasters are written as different questions.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on the paper?
I don't have any at this time.
Okay.
Me neither.
Would it be worth my going over this again next week?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. And did you both find the sample paper?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Because I think that will help you a lot.
Definitely.
Oh, I intend to use that.
Yeah,
Great resource.
I literally done the outlining for you.
Right. Much appreciated.
You are welcome. If there aren't any other questions, I think we can call it a night.
All right,
Okay.
have a good night, ladies.
You
Good
too,
night.
Kelly.
Thank
Thank you. Good night, Dr. Audrey. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you too. Bye.